Hello, this is Alessandrina, and today I want to talk about patterns and the opportunity that is offered when we work through our patterns. So, we all have patterns, and we inherit those patterns from our conditioning. So, from our parents, who inherit them from their parents, who inherit them from their parents, and on and on and on. And we also inherit patterns through social conditioning and resonance with the collective consciousness, and other ways in which we learn to cope, manage, and react in the world to the different ways in which reality presents itself to us, and ways in which we navigate this reality. So our patterns are not very conscious. That's the first thing to understand. When we're operating from patterns, we're not operating from consciousness. We're operating essentially from what you would call a program. In a way, you could say, if this happens, then that is what I do, and that would be a pattern. When this happens, then I do this. That's a pattern. And so when we start to operate in those ways that are almost like automatic and for sure unconscious, then what ends up happening is we're not in tune, we're not in sync with reality, with others, with the present moment, and ultimately we're not going to be implementing a solution, a strategy that is most optimal in relation to the reality that we're in. So the more we become aware of our patterns, which is sometimes difficult because patterns are often invisible to us, they're kind of internalized and taken for granted. And so the process, meditation can help, and sometimes even in meditation we can kind of not realize that we're operating from a pattern. So one really powerful way to realize that we have a pattern is any state of negative emotion that we go into is going to be a reflection of a pattern. Any conflict that we have also and that we experience in the context of relationship is also going to be a reflection of a pattern. And so when we become aware of those patterns through the process of mirroring in relationship, for instance, or through the process of becoming aware of our negative emotions and essentially tracing them back to a pattern that we have in our system, then the more we do that, the more we are empowered to not only uncover those patterns, to start to understand them, how they work, how they unfold in our lives, and also to start to assess and evaluate for ourselves the negative, detrimental effects that they bring into our relationship, into our how we feel about ourselves, into our thoughts, into our emotions, and into all aspects of life. And once we kind of do that mapping of patterns and we see that patterns are really not helpful and that they bring a lot of discomfort and pain, then we can be ready to face our patterns. And of course, for a lot of people, and that's understandable, facing our patterns can feel like a daunting experience, a daunting task, something that people don't want to do. Because in the process of facing our patterns, we can go into a reactive state of judgment, criticism, and self-punishment towards our own pattern. Or we can even go into blame towards our parents, our ancestors, the collective consciousness, and ways in which we've inherited those patterns from all of those different sources. So when we can remain grounded and accepting and forgiving of ourselves and anybody else who is part of that collective conditioning, then we can actually look at our patterns with peace, with acceptance, with love, with patience, with compassion, And when we do that, then it becomes possible. And now we have also the energy to look at the patterns, understand them, dismantle them, really trace them back to their root source and what's creating the pattern. For instance, oftentimes a pattern will be a result of a belief or a fear in our system. And when we see that clearly, and we can see that the pattern is having negative effects in our life because we've done that evaluation, that assessment, then it becomes easier for us to work at the root of the pattern, to clear it, to release it using a method of choice, whatever method you choose to release either fear or beliefs associated with the pattern. And then once you've done that process of resolution of the pattern, healing of the pattern, then you will feel better. You will feel more free. And so trying to avoid the pain of the pattern and the pain of your own judgment of the pattern is not helpful, and it's not essentially going to allow you to live without pain and suffering, or with less pain and suffering. And the more we face our patterns, the less pain and suffering we experience, the more freedom and joy we experience, the more space there is for creativity, for being able to connect with others and to be more present and more grounded. So essentially, clearing, releasing, resolving, healing patterns is a process of liberation from suffering. It's also a process that is going to bring about this possibility of receiving, truly receiving in the present moment, receiving from the universe, rather than being stuck in old programs that don't necessarily serve us and don't bring us the joy, the peace, the equanimity that is most optimal for us to experience, so that as a collective we can all enjoy each other, embrace each other, have more harmonious relationships. And for sure, our patterns don't help with that. So I invite you to essentially go through this process of identifying patterns in your life, patterns in yourself that are not serving you, and without judgment, to forgive these patterns, to accept them, to heal them, to love them, to bring them into the light of consciousness, where they can be completely dissolved. And then you can operate in a grounded and a really present manner. You can operate from consciousness, and you can enjoy living your life in that state of consciousness, rather than operating from one pattern to the next, to the next, to the next, in kind of a robotic manner, like as if we were sleepwalking. You could say that if we go from pattern to pattern to pattern, we're kind of operating as if we were sleepwalking and not really operating in the present moment from consciousness. And to be able to experience love, happiness, joy, inner peace, connection, fulfillment, this capacity to be present and to be conscious is very, very helpful and supportive of that. So I hope this is helpful, that it gives you some motivation and support in your process of dismantling your patterns. And I'm sending you much love.